Good afternoon. My name is Richard Burke. I'm the Executive Director of Western Liberty, and I'd like to welcome you to another in our ongoing series of Saturday Zoom training sessions. These are on live at 1 o'clock on Saturday. That's Pacific time, and we also record these. And if you go to the training tab on the westernlibertynetwork.org website, you can review them anytime you wish. We actually have quite a few people now that are doing that, now that word has gotten around that we have the recordings online. I have to point out very quickly that Western Liberty Network is a 501c3 organization, and as such, we do not and cannot either endorse or oppose any political party, any candidate, any ballot measure, or legislation, and we don't do those things. We do, however, take actions like the ones we're taking today with respect to Ukraine and having Andrey Illarionov as a guest. I'm going to share the screen just a moment and show you a couple of things for people who are watching the recording. What you will see here is our westernlibertynetwork.org homepage. There are a lot of resources on this homepage. You can always see what we're doing. This is a conference we have coming up in Klamath Falls on the 26th. You can check on that flyer that's available for download. Below that, we always have the story about the training that we were providing in our Saturday sessions. And obviously this features this week's training. You can just click by signing on with Zoom. If you scroll down, you can also see other speeches by other presenters at conferences and just a lot of resources here. Now, if you are interested in training, go to the training tab. And on the training tab, you will see some discussion of the kind of training Western Liberty Network offers. You can download training documents. These are meant to be provided with live training sessions, but they stand up on their own as well. You can get a lot of good information out of them. And if you scroll down a little farther, you will get recordings of our Saturday training sessions. And this training session that we're doing today is going to be posted within a couple of hours after its completion. But that is all available. And if you decide you like what you see in the training resources, just go to support WLN. And if you click on that, you will be able to make a tax deductible contribution, one-time contribution level, or monthly contribution level. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And we will get to our guest. Our guest is Andrey Illarionov. He is known for, you have a question, Dimitri. So your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to if you don't mind, I just wanted to jump in and thank Richard for setting this up, and also Andrey to be here as well. So this is a great time for our community from the Slavic community also to come in and learn about the situation firsthand. So thank you, Richard, and thank you, Andrey.
Yep, no problem. That was Dmitry Shashchenko. I never get the pronunciation right. Sorry about that. He is an officer with the Slavic Vote Organization. Mark Knudsen, did you have a question? You had your hand up for a second, Mark.
No, I was just raising my finger in support of, I just think it's awesome that you put this together. Thank you, Richard.
Oh, well, no problem. Thank you very much. And Mark, worked together for a long time with Mark. He's a great guy. I will now introduce Andrey Illarionov. He was Vladimir Putin's senior economic advisor back in the day until he left and his wife came to the United States. He did not agree with the direction that he was taking his country. He also worked at the Cato Institute upon arriving to the United States. And now Andrey is a senior fellow, as I understand it, at the Center for Security Policy. And he was on BBC News this week, and he's just released an article. Maybe he'll provide you a link to that article. Very good stuff. And with that, I'll stop yakking and introduce my friend, Andrey Illarionov.
Thank you, Richard, for inviting me, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming this Saturday for discussing the most urgent issue for today and for last 2-3 weeks. Let me first of all just put several points in front of you as an introduction, and after that, let's move to Q&A or to comments on what is going on right now. As we all know, Putin started war against Ukraine on February 24th. There are several points that I would like to make, and we can discuss each of them, all of them later. This is the war that Putin launched against Ukraine has been prepared, has been in preparation for more than 2 decades by Putin and his entourage. There were several steps before that. Some of you may remember Strip Tuzla in Strait of Kerch in year 2003 that Putin wanted to capture in year 2003. After that, there was a year 2008 aggression against Georgia, year 2014 occupation and attempt of annexation of Crimea, the war in Donbass that is lasting for 8 years. Since year 2012, it became clear that the purpose of Putin is to capture not only Crimea or Donbass, but to establish control over whole Ukraine. He has stated not once his goals. He has written about this extensively, including long essays in which he made claims towards Ukrainian territory and towards Ukraine. His purpose is to liquidate Ukrainian statehood and to essentially liquidate Ukrainian nations as an ethnic group. We are all aware that he made many times these groundless claims that Ukrainians and Russians is the same ethnic group. And based on these claims, whatever, it doesn't matter much actually whether he believes seriously in that or it is a political statement, but nevertheless, his statement is that is one nation, and that is why if somebody deviates from his understanding of one nation, these people should be actually exterminated. His pronounced goals, demilitarization and denazification, especially the last one, denazification, means essentially is liquidation of ethnic group Ukrainians as a nation. The particular term and the technology that's been applied by Putin in Ukraine right now over the last 17 days of aggression is exactly the same as Putin applied in South Ossetia and part of Georgia that has been temporarily occupied by Russian troops in year 2008. Same practice that has been implemented in Crimea, in occupied Donbass, in Chechen Republic after it has been occupied by the Russian troops. And it is exactly the same practice that has been employed by NKVD, predecessor of KGB and FSB, in the occupied territories of Eastern Poland in 1939-41, just after division, after the fourth division of Poland between Hitler and Stalin. So same practice that has been implemented by NKVD and Stalinist regime in occupied Baltic countries since 1940, in Western Ukraine and Western Belarus, in occupied Moldova, former Bessarabia, Northern Bukovina since 1940, and in countries of that went under the control of Stalin after the Second World War in the center of Europe. It is important to remember that even if today all our attention is concentrated on Ukraine, this is war not only against Ukraine. This war is being waged by Putin against Europe. It is necessary to have in mind that the final order to attack Ukraine, Putin gave on January 18th, year 2022, when everything has been prepared. for this attack. And why January 18th? What is this particular date? How it is related to the situation around Ukraine or with Ukraine? Some people try to claim that it was a response to the Ukrainian statement, the President of Ukraine Zelensky statement in Munich during the security conference over there on February 19th, year 2022, about necessity to implement Budapest Memorandum, or otherwise Ukraine would find some other ways to defend itself, including there is an accurate hint about possibility to come back to the nuclear. But the decision that Putin has taken was more than a month before this statement from Mr. Zelensky. So it means it is not related to this statement from Mr. Zelensky. Also, this decision is not related to the Minsk process or the negotiations within Minsk process, because on February 10th in Berlin, there was a gathering of 4 political advisors, 4 countries, Ukraine, France, Germany, and Russia, who discussed the possibilities to implement Minsk agreement. Once again, it is happened 3 weeks after Putin took a decision for military attack against Ukraine. So it is not related to Minsk process. The question arises, what was the final trigger for Putin to launch this war? And the final the event, the most important event that happened to be just before this date, January 18th, were 3 sessions of negotiations between Russia on one side and NATO in the United States on the other side, in Geneva, in Brussels, and in Vienna on January 11th, 12th, and 30th. Those negotiations were devoted to the so-called Putin's ultimatum to the West that has been published on December 17th, year 2021, last year, in which Putin proclaimed his goals and his demands to the West, to the collective West. And the issue of Ukraine was only one of them, and relatively small compared to other ones. The main goal of Putin that is proclaimed in that ultimatum was to return NATO to the 1997 division line in Europe, which means denatoization of such countries like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia, Bulgaria, Romania. Withdrawal of all NATO troops from those countries and demilitarization of those countries. It's even then, many people thought that it is some kind of cynical and out of date and crazy demand that cannot be not only fulfilled, but even cannot be discussed. The United States decided to come to negotiations with Putin. And as we all know, there was a series of negotiations in the middle of January. What is important that after that session of negotiations, Russian representatives in the name of Deputy Ministers of Foreign Affairs Grushko and Ryabkov made statements that the West did not understand the seriousness of the demands from the Russian side, including this one, refusal to discuss return of NATO to the 1997 division line in Europe. Moreover, 1 month later, on February 17th, just 1 week before the attack on Ukraine, the latest attack on Ukraine, Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has published official response to United States response during these negotiations on the so-called security guarantees to Russia, in which officially in the official document, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia stated that the main goal is still not being discussed, meaning return of NATO to the 1997 division line. Even more, on March 8th and on March 9th, already 2 weeks after the beginning of this war against Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs once again repeated their statements and their demands towards NATO, towards United States, toward the West. Return of NATO to the 1997 division line in Europe. So, summing up, even today, even after we see the heroic resistance of the Ukrainian military and the whole Ukrainian society against aggressor, we need to understand this war is not only against Ukraine. Ukraine happens to be only first stage, first theater of military actions for Putin. He has said not once that he's waging war against West, against Europe, against NATO, against the United States. It is a matter of the United States and the collective West to understand this very simple and very unpleasant truth and to start to act correspondingly. As we know, the current leadership of the United States prefer to think or just to make an appearance that this is a war only against Ukraine. United States, NATO, West has almost nothing to do with that. United States is not going to support Ukraine with all military support that United States can provide to do not provide no-fly zone. US president ordered not to provide jets MiG-29 from Poland, Slovakia, and Bulgaria to Ukraine. And the overall support for Ukraine was minimal. It was sometimes just unbelievable. The first decision of Mr. Biden was to provide Ukraine with military assistance for $350 million. At the same time, Czech Republic provided military assistance for $1 billion, and even tiny Luxembourg has provided $250 million. So now we understand this is a heavy fight is going on all Ukrainian fronts. Unfortunately, Russian troops exceeds Ukrainian troops in size and firepower. The quality of Ukrainian troops is higher than the Russian ones, and we saw the reports about the losses incurred by the aggressor in terms of manpower and in terms of equipment, military equipment, techniques, and so on. Nevertheless, we understand this is two very unequal participants in this war, and this war is only first step for much larger war that has been proclaimed not only in fantasies or in some kind of fictions on the Russian side. This is the official position of the current Russian political regime. So that is why the critical point now is just to organize and to force and to do everything possible that the United States and NATO would provide all necessary, first of all, military support for Ukraine. I have prepared a list of measures and steps that can be and should be done by the collective West of 20 points. And Richard has mentioned this text. It is available. You're welcome to look into it and to add to this. But now the critical moment to use all possible resources to force the US leadership and the NATO leadership to provide necessary help to Ukraine right now. If Putin is not stopped in Ukraine, he will go further, and it is no doubt at all who will be the next victims of this aggressor in Europe and maybe beyond Europe as well. I would stop here.
Okay, very good. Andrey, thank you very much. At this point, we're happy to take questions. One question I was asked to relay to you is that, I don't know how to phrase this. I guess the question is, from the Russian perspective, how are they trying to frame these arguments? How are they trying to defend what they are doing? I know that you and I have heard what they have said, and we've made our evaluation of that. But to someone who maybe isn't as well versed in these issues, what is it that they're trying to say to defend their actions?
Essentially, they don't bother much about publicly defending their actions because they're using hardware policies. And that is why this information discussion is not so important for them. For example, a couple of days ago, Lavrov, Minister for Foreign Affairs, when he met with Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Dmytro Kuleba in Turkey, has said publicly to the press that Russia is not going to attack anyone, and Russia did not attack Ukraine. And he said it absolutely straight face. So that is why for them, what are they doing? This is a total and complete lie, and they don't even try to to camouflage their lie with any cover. They just lying from the very beginning, and this outright lie continues.
Okay, I'm going to share the screen really quick and show Andrey's article. I've just put the link into the chat window to his article, and when you point your browser to that link, this is what you'll see. And it's an excellent article, a lot of detail, a lot of history, and I encourage everyone to check it out. Okay, now I know it takes people a minute or two to formulate questions, so go ahead and formulate your questions. If you would like to ask a question or you would like to make a comment, feel free to unmute your microphone. Mark Knudsen, you have a comment. Go ahead.
Sure, thank you. First of all, thanks for your summary, Andrey. I truly appreciate you being here. I am curious, so obviously the U.S. approach at this point has weighed heavily on economic and financial sanctions. Given your background and understanding the economy of Russia in general, will it make a difference, and how long would it take to make a difference for the people of Russia to suddenly sort of have enough in terms of being thrown back to the previous century in terms of the economy of Russia?
Unfortunately, the impact of sanctions is next to zero. And I kept this position for last at least 14 years, since year 2008, since attack on Georgia, when this discussion on sanctions started in the West. And each time, regardless what kind of sanctions have been applied, my point was it is impossible to stop rolling tanks with sanctions, regardless how what kind of sanctions are being applied to aggressor. When tanks are rolling, when the guns are shooting, when the missiles are falling on the cities, there is no way to stop them except of hardware military response. We know that in 1994, Russia, it was not only after sanctions, but after economic collapse of the early 90s, when the Russian economy has been halved, Russia started the war against Chechnya, and nothing stopped it. In 98, when the Russian economy, Russian GDP declined by 40%, and industrial output was 60% lower than it was in 89, Russian regime, including Mr. Putin, started the second Chechen war. So the limitations of economic potential did not stop them from engage in a very serious war. During the Second World War, in 1942, when the substantial portion of the territory of the Soviet Union has been occupied by Nazi Germany, it did not stop Stalin to resist this attack and wage war that finally happened to be victorious for the Soviet Union. In 1939, during the just right after the beginning of Soviet-Finnish War, or Winter War, as it is known in Finland, Talvisota, the League of Nations has expelled Russia from the League of Nations. Nevertheless, this is a very serious sanction. It is certainly a political sanction, but it's a very serious sanction. And this sanction did not stop Stalin from waging war against Finland for another 100 days. And it did not stop Stalin troops to occupy Baltic countries. It did not stop Stalin troops to occupy Bessarabia and Bukovina. The only thing that can stop troops is another military force. And not only military force, but military force strong enough to stop that force. Unfortunately, we are already in a stage of war, of real war, not a hybrid war, but a real war. At least conventional war, maybe worse. And that is why in the real war, whatever you would do with sanctions, with expulsion from international organizations, with statements, that cannot stop the real military action.
Thank you. That's troubling to say the least, but I appreciate your candid response. Thank you.
So, Andrey, it sounds like, if I understand you correctly, we're at war now. We just don't know it yet as a nation. And that you're prompting us to wake up to the fact that we're at war and act accordingly. Is that fair?
Yes, your understanding is absolutely correct. And I'm not the only person. There are many persons already. People said and publicly written that the February 24th, year 2022, is equal to September 1st, 1939. The very fact that Germany attacked Poland, some people thought that it is only Germany and Poland, and that's all. And even as we know, there was a strange war in the Western Front with Britain and France that did not participate in active campaign until June 1940. But the very fact that others did not pay much attention to what was going in Poland did not change the fact that the Second World War has been started on September 1st, 1939. The same story is right now. Today's Poland is Ukraine. Today's Nazi Germany is Putin's Russia. And today we are at least in the European war. And we don't know whether this European war will expand to something worse and larger. And as we all know from the history lessons from the First World War and from the Second World War, the longer the strongest participants abstain from participation in the real war, the worse the outcome of that war. The best way to stop the war is just to stop aggressor, the sooner the better.
I want to, Barbara Kantz has a question. Go ahead, Barbara, unmute yourself.
I did. Thank you for being here. And I would tell everybody to sign up for the email for the Center for Security Policy. I receive your emails every day, and they're excellent for ignorant people like me. Would you talk about the Budapest Memorandum and what significance that has and what obligations supposedly the countries have? Thank you.
As probably you know, the Budapest Memorandum was an international treaty that guaranteed sovereignty and territorial integrity to Ukraine for Ukraine giving up the nuclear weapons. And those guarantees have been given to Ukraine by four great powers: United States, United Kingdom, France, and Russia. As we all know, Russia violated Budapest Memorandum, and three other guarantors, United States, United Kingdom, France, did nothing according to the text of this memorandum to ensure territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. The Budapest Memorandum has a one provision that as soon as territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine is violated, those guarantors would immediately start consultations among themselves what is necessary to be done in order to stop this violation or in order to do whatever. Ukraine 4 times asks and requests United States, United Kingdom, and France to start these consultations. All 4 times, 3 guarantors on the West refused to have any consultations in this case. So this is a violation of international treaty, not only from the Russian side, which we all know, but it is also a violation of this treaty, international treaty from the Western guarantors.
It sounds like then, according to the Budapest Memorandum, that we're obliged to do whatever is necessary to encourage or to ensure Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, including active engagement in the war.
We can discuss what can be understood in that, but the consultations is very clear instrument that have been in the text of the memorandum. So that is why this is what is exactly in written form is in the text of the treaty. And the very fact that the Western nations did nothing to implement even that part of the treaty is quite shocking.
One question I have, it seems to me that Vladimir Putin is committed. He is all in. Now that he has gone this far, he's betting everything on it, his regime, maybe the integrity of the Russian Federation itself. And it's either victory or collapse for him. Is that the position you think he's in right now?
Yes, I think you're right.
So he has very little to lose in his mind by continuing on. How strong? Go ahead.
It is like a pathological, maniacal approach towards Ukraine, towards Europe, towards NATO, towards the United States. He has said it so many times that we cannot see it just as a fantasy or some kind of mistakes. This is his position. So that is why the only way to change his mind is a military defeat for Russia, at least in Ukraine, and maybe just for the whole country.
Do you think there is anything that he would not do at this time to achieve a military victory in the way of chemical weapons, biological weapons, or nuclear weapons?
It's better to consult with psychologists or psychiatrists, not with me.
Yeah, I guess so. Other questions and comments? Okay, let me ask you this, Andrey. What can the people on this call do? What can we do to, oh, I'm sorry, Dmitry, you've got a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, as obviously here in the United States, Portland specifically, we have a big Slavic community. And it seems like they're very divided when it comes to this issue. And how would you, basically, what I'm hearing, a lot of people are saying that Putin has no choice and he has to do this. And how do you answer those kind of, how do you answer that question, for example, to those people who believe that Putin had no choice and he had to do this in order to defend against NATO?
Frankly speaking, I just cannot understand such statements. What does mean he did not have a choice? He did not have a choice to kill people, thousands of people. He did not have a choice not to attack another country, peaceful country. He did not have a choice to start an aggression. This is exactly the style of Adolf Hitler when he was trying to justify his attack on Poland. Hitler was also saying that he has no other choice but to attack Poland and to kill millions of people. And after that, he said exactly the same about Jews and about organized Holocaust, that he did not have another choice just to kill millions of people. That's exactly the same approach. So that is why my response to those people who claim so, okay, it was exactly the same approach as Hitler. And the end of Mr. Putin will be exactly the same as Hitler. And all those people who support Putin today will be the same as the fate of those who supported Hitler. Just tell them exactly that.
And what do you think people can do on this call to support Ukraine and the efforts of the Ukrainian forces and people?
Well, there are several ways, several things that can be done. One is certainly is just to help directly Ukrainians with whatever you can help with financial support, with providing medical equipment or whatever. Just it's one story. I cannot exclude there are some Ukrainians, and not only Ukrainians, but Slavic people who, in this case, as a normal Slavic people, should defend freedom, law, democracy, just civilization against barbarism. So that is why that's that position of normal Slavic people. Those who on the other side, it's not Slavic people, they are absolutely barbarians, and that should be absolutely clear. But the way to support is also to communicate with your members of the House of Representatives, with the senators, that they would use all possible resources to put a pressure on the US administration to change this position, because this is a way not only to the way that US administration is taking right now is not only to bury Ukraine and to bury thousands, tens of thousands, if not millions of Ukrainians, but that would lead to millions of deaths in Europe and maybe around the world. So that is why the sooner the United States leadership would change its position, the faster these war might be stopped, and the sooner the peace and security might be restored in Europe and the whole world.
Democracies often have a hard time getting involved with these sorts of things, but they always miss the boat. I'm not an expert in history, but my understanding was that a few years prior to 1939, seeing what was coming, if France had taken action in Germany, that Hitler would have been overthrown easily, but they waited too long and ended up having to deal with the beast that Nazi Germany was. It seems to me that this is a parallel, that if we were to get involved right now, we would have a much better chance of stopping Putin rather than waiting and then only becoming engaged when Vladimir Putin has expanded this war. It seems to me that if the war did expand into Moldova and maybe the Baltic republics and all of those other places, it would encourage China to invade Taiwan. It would encourage North Korea to act up and get more aggressive. It would encourage Iran to get more aggressive in the Middle East. And then we really would have a World War III. It seems to me that getting involved now at a more active level and a more kinetic physical level is perhaps the best way to avoid larger calamities ahead. Andrey, do I go too far?
I can only subscribe to what you have said right now. The best way to avoid the Third World War, the best way to avoid this European war to be evolved into the Third World War, to act now. Otherwise, they just abstain from this participation and just to pretend that there is nothing serious is going on. Is exactly to invite the Third World War, which is not yet the fact.
Incidentally, for those who have maybe been watching the chat window, a link has been provided to Andrey's article in the Center for Security Policy, and Dmitry has also provided a link to Andrey's speech before the Western Liberty Network conference a few years ago. That was fantastic, by the way. A lot of discussion about the nature of freedom itself and the Second Amendment. Are there other questions related to the current topic from anyone here? Or does anyone have any comments they'd like to make? Okay, thank you very much. We've got a lot. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I don't know if you can hear me. My computer wouldn't go on earlier. It said the speakers were off and I didn't have it configured to listen correctly without video.
It's okay.
But here's the thing I'm curious about. There are no sanctions, in my opinion, against Russia that I can understand that we can do that makes them give a darn as long as they've got China kind of in their side pocket. Am I right?
That's an interesting question. What is the role of China in all of this, Andrey?
It's a dual. China is playing a dual game here. On one hand, it's clearly that the Chinese leadership at the moment is not extremely happy with this attack of Putin against Ukraine, and especially in the way how this attack is being performed. Chinese, as well as many people around the world, are shocked by the poor behavior of the Russian troops, ineffectiveness, and the number of civilians being killed en masse by Russian troops. On the other hand, strategically, China is an ally to Putin's Russia, and China is not going to introduce any sanctions against Russia. They would try to use this unique situation to get the upper hand in Russia, getting more positions in the economy, in the territory, and just to get more resources from Russia at lower prices than it was before. So that is why this is a kind of cynical pragmatism on the part of Chinese leadership towards Russia.
I understood what you just said, but so what you're saying is that if this goes on, China benefits in some way, and Russia won't be punished by them or anything. I mean, even though they may not like what Russia's doing, they're not going to do anything about it, and except give them benefit because Russia will now turn to them to buy things that they can't get from Europe.
No, China China is not going to introduce any sanctions. China is going to continue to trade with Russia to provide some necessary resources. It's a very important channel for supplying Russia with some important materials, and I don't see any sign that China would change this attitude. Nevertheless, so far China is trying to be a little bit at distance with Russia, but this attitude might change if Russia will start winning. So this is some kind of the situation in which China would find quite attractive to join victors, and that is why it would make the attack against Taiwan much more likely, rather than in the situation of the military defeat in Ukraine. It reminds me what happened in relations between Nazi Germany and fascist Italy before the Second World War. In 1934, when Hitler was trying to annex Austria for the first time, the first Anschluss, Italy and Mussolini was strictly opposing this act. It was one of the factors that did not allow Hitler to do Anschluss in 1934. But 4 years later, situation has changed, and the aggressor, after a number of victories, a number of rounds, the aggressor became much more attractive. And in 1938, Mussolini fully supported Hitler in annexation of Austria. So that is why it is very important and very dangerous if today Russia will be allowed to make victories in Ukraine. It means that at the next steps and next stages, the cumulative resources of aggressors might be much larger than it is today. Today is Russia and Belarus, but if to allow Russia and Putin to continue his aggression against Ukraine, tomorrow or day after tomorrow, the camp of aggressors might be much larger, much stronger, much more powerful. And for the United States, for NATO, it would be incomparably harder to deal with such a united front of aggressors.
I wish
ahead,
we
Barbara.
had, well, I was just gonna say, I wish we had some generals. I wish we had some real military. That's our problem. We don't have anybody smart enough to negotiate and think this through on the upper level.
Or people with the courage to act. Barbara, go ahead. You have a question?
What's going on with the Russian people? I know some have demonstrated, they've been arrested. Are the Russian people just going to allow this to continue? Do they care?
This is you need to understand the political situation in Russia and the nature of political regime in Russia. It is already semi-totalitarian regime, in some case totalitarian regime. So that is why the potential impact of Russian population on decision-making process in Kremlin is next to zero. What kind of impact might be from Soviet people on decision-making process of Mr. Stalin, or German people on Hitler during the Second World War? Zero. So this is a different world. It's not a democratic country. It's not the civilized world. It's a very different world. So that is why, regardless of what Russian people really think and what they really do, it's not the way how this aggression might be stopped. This is a different world. This is a totalitarian aggressors attacking democratic countries in Europe. Just remember the experience of the Second World War. Just whether we saw any demonstrations on the streets of Berlin against attack on Poland or attack on France, or whether we've seen anything like a meeting or demonstrations on streets of Moscow against occupation of Baltic countries or against aggression against Finland. No, it's just joke. This is a totalitarian regime. Those people who would be courageous enough to raise their voice, in the best case, they would be behind bars. In the worst case, they would be in the camps. And there are some other worst cases. This is a different world. This is a real war. This is a real war internally in Russia and Belarus. And this is a war already beyond the borders of Russia and Belarus.
What about the oligarchs, Andrey? I'm sure that the billionaires are going to get tired of losing money and having their mansions and yachts taken away. Is there a chance we may wake up in the morning and find that Vladimir Putin has a bullet in his head and no one knows from who?
No, once again, the so-called oligarchs are not much different from the regular Russian population. Mm-hmm. They don't have any impact on the decision-making process. They don't have any access to Kremlin or to the bank or to whatever. Mm-hmm. They are, even in the better times, were some kind of, in the best case, only fulfilling the tasks and orders from Kremlin. This is a very wrong understanding of the nature of political regime in Russia. For the last 25 years, I keep hearing from the Western commentators about importance of oligarchs, and the very word oligarch is wrong, because oligarchs, those who have power. The so-called oligarchs, they don't have power at all. They have money, but they don't have power. Mm-hmm. And they don't have any resources to influence any decision-making process even before the war. But in war, they have zero impact. Okay. So that is why to expect anything from them, even some of them would be unhappy about that. Just, okay, they could find themselves behind bars as some of the rich people in Nazi Germany, like Thyssen. Mm-hmm. Thyssen, for some, initially he supported Nazi party, but during the Second World War, he happened to be in opposition to Hitler. So he found himself in a concentration camp,
Mhm.
and his billions did not save him from this fate.
Mhm.
Once again, it is necessary to understand the nature of the political regime.
Okay. How long do you think it'll take for Ukraine to win this war?
It depends whether the West will help or not.
Mhm.
If the West will not help, I would certainly, I don't want to have this result, but we need to be pretty sober in understanding the ratio between the military forces and military equipment and weapons and the size of economy of Russia and Ukraine.
It seems that, well, correct me. It took Hitler 1.5 million to occupy Ukraine after it was conquered. It took Stalin 2 million to occupy Ukraine after it was conquered. It seems to me that even if Russia was to achieve a military victory over the Ukrainian armed forces, that occupation would be extremely problematic, and it would be a constant source of bleeding for them that could bring down the Russian regime just because of that. Do you think that's a possibility, or do you think they would be able to pacify Ukraine?
I've read many stuff from military experts about that. Seems to me many of them, at least some of them, really missing the point. Putin is not going to do what they expect from them, and what actually happened even under Hitler, because the Putin's approach is a different one. It's a Grozny type approach or Aleppo type approach, and we already see what is going on in Mariupol, in Kharkiv, in Volnovakha, in many other places. They're using artillery to completely erase cities and towns and villages completely, and to kill everybody. So that's why their purpose is not just to allow partisan movement, as the Germans allowed, or some kind of were not able to fight effectively during the Second War. No, they're much more brutal than Nazi Germans during the Second World War. They are going to destroy everything, that just nobody would be there.
I see. So the message takeaway here is we're at war. We better wake up to it and act accordingly, because the war has started and we're in it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone else have anything to say or any questions to ask? Okay, I don't think so. Andrey, we're going to let you go. I want to thank you very much for this fantastic presentation today. I want to thank you for answering all of our questions and providing us with your perspective. I think we have a lot to think about, and we have a lot to do.
All right. Thank you, Richard, for inviting. I wish all the best to everybody. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you.
Slava Ukraina!